Thank you. Okay, so our agenda tonight, we have our executive board updates, and then we have a few rep announcements. And then we have our Q&A with Dr. Menzel. That's just our general Q&A we have each meeting. And then tonight we have a special Q&A with Dr. Sackos, who is the head of diversity and equity inclusion programs in SUSD. And then we have Dr. Sallu, who's the director of equity inclusion at Chandler Unified School District, as our main speaker tonight. For our updates, so last meeting we talked about the backpack drive that our outreach committee was doing, and it was extremely successful. They collected a whole bunch of supplies, and then we had $1,500 donated. So that was divided up amongst the schools. So thank you everyone who helped and participated with that. As far as SPC reps, we have a few schools that we have one rep open. We have a rep at each school, but Pueblo, Pima, Ingleside, Coronado, and Scottsdale Online, we still have one open position at each of those schools. So if anyone's interested, please reach out to your principal. And advocacy, as everyone probably knows, the election is 15 days away. The best place to find out where to vote, what the status of your ballot is beballotready.vote, and that has information specific to you. And then that's from the Maricopa County Recorder's Office. And then as far as upcoming events in November, so far we have just our general meeting, November 18th scheduled. And then we also have a special workshop that Dr. Sallu will be mentioning as her presentation. All right, so we have our rep announcements. So we have Pueblo, Cheyenne, and Kiva. So we'll have Pueblo go first. I believe Holly is going to speak for Pueblo.
Yes, just wanted to, I'm sure if people were listening to the board meeting yesterday, they saw that Pueblo just achieved A+ rating. So we are very excited about that.
Great, thank you, Holly. And then for Cheyenne, we have Andrea.
Hi, my name is Andrea Augustine. I'm the SPC rep for Cheyenne. We are very excited because we now have a resident tortoise in at our school. It's been about a year in the making, and it took a while because it got delayed, of course, because of COVID, but we got it finished, and now we have a female tortoise habitat. And so we'll have a naming contest in the coming weeks, and the kids are really excited about that. So just a shout out. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Andrea. And next we have Sima for Kiva. She has some graphics. Can't think of the word I'm looking for. So Sima, are you ready?
I'm ready. Are you able to do the?
I do. I have it ready.
Okay, yay. Okay, good. So at Kiva Elementary, we've got all the kids are talking about how next.
Uh-oh.
Principal.
Oh, there we go. You're cutting in and out, Sima.
Okay. So I'm just reading what the slide says basically,
Okay.
but a little more fun on Friday. So go ahead to the next slide. Uh-oh. Okay. So we've got Superman on some Fridays. He flew through the halls with a skateboard. Keep going. And then Batman was really, really fun. Watching over the school, picking up left behind sports equipment to take to his bat cave. He also did announcements. And this was really awesome. And Mr. Gromek did this as well during EDL. So he would do Friday morning announcements starting with DJ MG with music and dancing, and it's been a blast, him fully dressed in costume. And then our Kiva Cougar has also done some dance parties as well. And one time he had Casey the Cougar do a chores list, working around campus and cleaning it up for everyone. And that was it, but just a little more fun. The kids really come home talking about it. And it's something really unique and different to bring up everybody's motivation and spirits.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now on to Dr. Menzel. So per usual, we had questions submitted in advance just because it's a little easier that way with Zoom. So I will be reading all of those. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. The first, we just have a couple of miscellaneous questions. Are you able to speak a bit more in detail of how the, I think it's MERV 13 filter installation has improved the air quality and ventilation in our classrooms, specifically since we're regularly having infected kids in the classroom? It would be reassuring to know a bit more about the air turnover and that our kids aren't sitting in stagnant air for 75 minutes.
So I think it's a good question. And I appreciated having it ahead of time so that I could talk with Dennis Rayler, who is our Director of Building Services. And we have upgraded our MERV filters to MERV 13. Our equipment was designed for MERV 8 filters. And so if you think about the higher the level of the filter, the more particles it filters out as it's going through the air handling system. And while I've got a lot of information about ASHRAE recommendations in terms of what they're looking for, long story short is in almost every classroom, we'll have full air exchange every 5 to 8 minutes. And that's even with the increased filtration system. So not only have we increased the filters to MERV 13, and we're replenishing the air in the space every 5 to 8 minutes, but based on the recommendation from ASHRAE, which is the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers, we've also continued to purge the buildings after students leave. And so often, in order to save money, when buildings are vacated, you turn the system down. We keep recycling the air in order to ensure that we keep it as clean as possible. So our team has been working to not only implement those filtration systems, but then also staying on top of any repairs needed to the HVAC system, so that because any delay in that or anything that causes a pause in the air circulation could be a problem. So they're trying to stay on top of all of the maintenance requests as quickly as possible.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, the next one is, I do not understand how Cheyenne was granted a full return option while the other middle schools have not been given that choice. It seems unfair to all the other middle school students that deserve a full day of instruction. How is this decision made, and why isn't it being offered to other middle schools with fewer students?
So as we were moving towards October 12th and reopening for our middle schools and high schools, we had a request from Cheyenne to move in a different direction. They had their teachers volunteer to have cameras in the classroom. They in the proposal that was sent to me outlined what they'd been doing since August 10th. So unlike any other building in the district, Cheyenne was operating synchronously all day long, even while we were all online. Other classes had a combination of synchronous time with the teacher and asynchronous learning as well. Cheyenne was synchronous from the first day all the way through. And initially my response to the proposal was that we would wait to see how things played out before I would consider it. But then after further reflection, I did struggle with the notion that as a K-8 campus, they straddle the fence between the elementary and the high school. And so what we did is we said we should look at offering this option to all of the K-8s. The reasons why we don't have it for standalone middle schools and the high schools relate to the complexity of the scheduling, as well as the fact that we don't have sufficient cameras to be able to do that in all of the classrooms. But our K-8s are structured very much like our elementary schools, and to have a schedule that looked like that made sense. And one of the things that I was interested in learning from a pilot project like we've approved with Diane is how well the cameras work for students who are learning online and for the students who are in the classroom. I wanted to hear from teachers what worked, what didn't work, what could be improved. I want to hear from students what their experience was like, and then ultimately whether or not parents were satisfied with that option. The board is considering what do we do in the second semester. We've got people working on that and understanding whether or not cameras provide a viable option to be able to continue providing meaningful online learning experiences for our students made sense. So we looked at the pilot project in Cheyenne for that reason. And the decision was made the week of fall break. I recognize that that didn't give a lot of time for people to consider their options. And I think while there may have been some interest in the other K-8s, they preferred to wait until the change of the semester versus trying to do it right away. Cheyenne was prepared to do it immediately, and so that's why we said yes.
Okay. The next questions are all around two main topics. So the first one is just the handling of current cases and mostly like around quarantine. So there's two that I'll just read together. Please clarify COVID quarantine policy and whether it deviates at all from Maricopa County or ADHS guidance. And please clarify the district policy when it comes to quarantining students who may have had contact with a positive test case. There seems to be some misunderstanding, for example, allegedly requiring the entire Chaparral football team, varsity and JV, to quarantine when only a few have tested positive.
All right, so if I don't answer all the questions, just remind me which part I didn't address. To start with, we are in regular communication with the Maricopa County Department of Public Health. We had another hour-long meeting today with the director of the department, as well as with Dr. Sonnenschein and other people on their team. Our nurses are in contact almost daily with their investigation teams whenever there are cases that are reported. Not only are we using the benchmark data that was recommended by the Arizona Department of Health Services, we are following the guidance and recommendations of the health department as we take the next steps now that we have students back on all of our campuses. So when it comes to what happened with the football team early on, all of these cases are dealt with individually. The investigative team at the health department looks into the specifics of each case, working with our nurse and building administrators and others to find out when an individual became symptomatic, when they tested positive, and then what the communication strategy is. In the case of the football experience, we had a student that was symptomatic, came to practice for 4 days, including a scrimmage. The following week, tested positive for COVID. And so we had exposure, and the JV and the varsity practiced together. We had exposure that you couldn't easily contact trace in that environment because it wasn't just one subset of the football team that was engaging in physical activity. It's unmasked, it's close contact, it does all of those things. And so given the specifics around that interaction and the amount of exposure when the person that was COVID positive was symptomatic and it was confirmed that the individual was symptomatic, they recommended that we quarantine JV and varsity football. The day that we announced that quarantine, a second student tested positive as well. That was an athlete. That's when we got the outbreak notification. Because an outbreak is when 2 or more cases are identified that can't be connected through household contact, friendships, or other known ways that they could have gotten COVID. So in the case of the football program, those 2 individual cases, they couldn't find another way that the individuals acquired the virus. And so it confirmed not only their decision in the quarantine recommendation, but also it was the reason why we had to issue the outbreak letter. We had a similar situation in Arcadia with another sports team, and the outbreak was still only 2 individuals, but it was because the only points of intersection were their participation in an athletic practice. So that's part of it. Then when you get to October 12th and beyond, bless you, as students are coming back to school, we as you know, we encourage anyone who's sick or exhibiting symptoms like COVID to stay home. And if you know you have COVID, we expect you to stay home. In the first week back, we ended up having a number of students who came to school that first day. They did not feel well. They got tested, and we had reports from parents that their children tested positive. We had confirmation from the health department of those positive tests. And so then that starts the process for communication. The health department cautions us from moving too quickly on our communication strategies because they want and need to confirm that it is a lab confirmed case. So when a parent calls the school nurse and said, my child has tested positive for COVID, the health department said our first step is to isolate that student. That's the risk they're willing to take, because even if it turns out that the test that came back was not an antigen or PCR test, but it was an antibody test or something else, it's okay to have taken that precautionary measure. But the health department doesn't want us to begin quarantining people and removing them from the school for 14 days until we know, one, that the COVID case has been confirmed, and two, that we've done proper contact tracing to identify who should be quarantined. That's the reason why in all of our schools, we have a seating chart requirement so that we can identify who was within that 6 feet or less for 10 minutes or more period of time. The quarantine list is reviewed with the nurse, the building administrators, and the investigation team from the county before we send those letters out. And so every step of the way, we're looking at the specific case, the individuals who may have had general exposure. So if you were in a class where a couple of classes came together, but they maintained the seating chart, the health department says you don't have to have everyone quarantined, but you need to let all of those that were within proximity, let them know of a potential general exposure. They also indicate that you don't have to let the whole district know every time there's a general exposure, because that's not really relevant information then. And so the communication with our families is customized based on the specific case, what we've learned in the investigation, and then determining whether or not any of those cases relate to potential transmission within the school, or if it all happened outside the school. Is there anything that I missed in those questions?
Nope, that covered it.
Right.
All right, thank you. Two more on quarantine though. So given the high numbers of families currently in quarantine for being a close contact of a confirmed case, are there plans for quarantining to become optional?
So I have asked the question multiple ways in terms of the impact of quarantining and having students not in school because they were deemed to have been in close contact. The recommendations from our public health officials are pretty firm in this regard, both Arizona and CDC. Even if you're wearing masks, there's still some element of risk if you're within 6 feet or less for 10 minutes or more. And because we're working to arrest the spread of COVID in this congregate setting, their recommendation is not to take the chance. And so as much as students want to be back, and we would like them to be back, without the health department modifying its guidelines, we're going to follow those recommendations pretty consistently as best as we can. The other part of that is people say, well, if I get a negative test, why shouldn't I be able to come back early? And we've asked that question to the health department as well. The problem is that the incubation period is 2 to 14 days. And so you can test negative on day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, and still be carrying the virus all the way up to day 14. If you actually are a student that has COVID, a positive diagnosis, your isolation period is actually shorter. It's 10 days. And after that period of time, provided you're symptom-free and don't have a fever, you're able to come back to school. But because the incubation period is 2 to 14 days, the quarantine time is longer. And again, we've asked, is there any way that we can do this differently? And the recommendations from our public health officials is no. In order to reduce the risk of spread, this is our recommendation. And they also said that our request to the community to engage in mitigation strategies larger than just what happens in school is something that they would have recommended if we hadn't done it already. And I'm referencing the letter that we sent on Monday. So it's really about what's happening in the larger community and what's happening in our schools. And so it's collective effort that will be required in order for us to keep our schools open.
Okay. Are there specific COVID-19 metric threshold case counts or number of kids quarantined that pushes a school into mandatory online status? Meaning, what criteria have you or the Maricopa County Health Department set as a threshold for changing our course of action?
So the current benchmark metrics moving, we're currently in the moderate transmission category, or yellow. Red would be substantial transmission in the community. Those metrics are a 10% positivity rate or 100 cases per 100,000 or more. And the guidance from ADHS is if you move back to red for 2 consecutive weeks in any one of those 3 indicators, they recommend returning to virtual learning. In the case of Scottsdale, one of the things that we've discussed is not requiring all of the schools to go back to virtual. If we have some zip codes within the boundaries of our district that hit that threshold for 2 consecutive weeks, we could move those schools to virtual. But why would we penalize other schools where they are still in the moderate transmission phase if in fact you can isolate by zip code? Now, what we're seeing at the present time is an increase in cases, Maricopa County, Arizona, and all across the country. What's unknown is the time to which that gets back to substantial transmission and we all go back to virtual, or if people pay attention to the fact that the numbers are going in the wrong direction and they begin to behave differently. We know that in Arizona, mid-May, we opened up, we didn't have a mask requirement. Our numbers went through the roof. We implemented a mask requirement. We had other mitigation strategies as well, but we had a 75% reduction in the number of cases after we implemented the mask mandate. So I believe that if our community is serious about being able to keep our schools open and slowing the spread of COVID, that by taking specific actions, we can avoid having to shut down again. But the metrics that the Department of Health Services has recommended and our board has adopted will guide our decision-making on this journey.
Okay, the next question kind of relates to that. It says, would you consider revisiting the metrics being used within SUSD? Seems the metrics being used are the most restrictive, making it nearly impossible to achieve green status during this school year. And then also a short question after that is, do you expect masks will be mandated for the full school year?
So in terms of changing the metrics, that ultimately would be a decision for the governing board. While some districts have done so, it's at the risk of educators making a public health decision. And so at least as of now, the board has been pretty clear they want the public health officials to make those recommendations while we continue to find strategies to ensure that our students get the education they need during a pandemic. I have to be clear, I really don't want to close our schools. I really do believe that it's important for our kids, for their mental health, for their education, and for our community. I want to stay open. At the same time, I want to make sure that we are not putting people unnecessarily in harm's way with the spread of COVID. And while I recognize the numbers in terms of fatality for young people are really low, the numbers even for younger demographics, comparatively speaking, may not look bad, but there's still so much unknown about this virus, about the long-term effects. And none of us know exactly how our bodies will respond if and when we get COVID. And so it's about being prudent while we're still learning. And to that end, I expect that for the balance of this year, masks will be required. If something changes in both our knowledge and experience of COVID, if we have a vaccine and effective treatments, if we find new emerging information and consensus from the scientific community that we can move in a different direction, we would consider that information at the time. But given how things are progressing at the moment, I suspect that mask wearing will be a requirement for the balance of the school year if we're going to stay open.
Okay, great. So all the next questions are related to the planning for spring and just what sort of planning is happening, and then when parents will be informed of the plans. So each has some context around it. So I'm just going to read a bunch and then you can give your overview. Are you starting to plan for middle and high school students to fully return in January? These half days are not working with my child, and I'm sure others feel the same. This is not the same education, and the quote independent study in the afternoons doesn't make up for a full school day. And then please explain, assuming the metrics remain consistent for the duration of Q2, the plan to allow full return to school in Q3. The district is in danger of losing even more students without a concrete plan in place. And then when we decided to do EDL, I was sure my kids would go back in January. I thought that certainly by then we had figured out how to live with COVID. Based on what I'm seeing at Chaparral and parents who are actively encouraging people to not get their children tested, I guess not. I am also seriously worried about what our numbers will be come January after 2 weeks of winter break and vacations. Will EDL be continued through the end of the school year? The last one is, I am concerned that there will not be enough teachers for in-person numbers to ramp up in January. When will SUSD survey parents again about the second half of the school year? We all committed to our choice through December, but how many SOL and EDL families will convert to in-person for January? How much lead time is needed to have enough in-person teachers? I know of a couple elementary schools that say they are currently full and cannot accommodate more in-person students. How will the district accommodate current SOL and EDL students who live within the school boundaries who want to return in person in January?
Those were a lot of questions, Emmy.
I know, sorry. They're all about the same question though.
I'll do my best to cover that. The planning for second semester is underway, and it's been underway for some time at different levels. But essentially, the first thing that people should know is that we are starting with the premise of 5-day, full day educational experiences as an option for our families. In the elementary, we're already doing that. What we've learned in the elementary, though, is that teachers who are trying to do both in-person and online, that is not working very well. Some teachers are doing it with some degree of success, but by and large, it's really taxing, and particularly for the younger kids. If you're in a kindergarten classroom and you've got 15 students in the classroom and 5 students online, and you've got, as you know, kindergartners, they do a lot of movement and their attention span is really short. And to have kids watching their classmates for a full school day in a kindergarten classroom really doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's very hard on our teachers. So we think that in the elementary, we've got to think about having a standalone EDL option that's properly staffed. And it may not be and may not allow parents to necessarily be connected with their neighborhood school for the balance of the second semester, but it will ensure that they've got a dedicated teacher, specials, and support during that period of time. For our specialty programs, we might not be able to get away with having that standalone option. Think about dual language immersion programs, Mandarin teachers. We may still have to rely on cameras in some respect in those environments, and we may have to use cameras for periods of time where individuals are required to quarantine, which are shorter in duration. And while it will place an additional burden on teachers in part, it's not the same as trying to co-plan for online and in-person learning at that environment. When you move to the middle school and high school, if you assume for a minute, and these conversations are still happening, that you're going to have a traditional 6 or 7 period day, then kids are moving through their courses more quickly. They're older, theoretically should be able to be more self-directed and independent, whereas for a kindergartner trying to watch the screen, parents have to be actively engaged in order to be able to monitor that. We might be able to make more effective use of cameras in that environment. So that's part of what's being considered, not only for instructional delivery, but also for addressing the needs when students are required to quarantine. We are committed to having a viable and meaningful online educational option, as well as an in-person option for our families in semester 2. We're going to have to figure out how to pare back those options, because what we've experienced in this semester has led to a fair amount of frustration. So the question, or the point that was made about 73 minutes if you're in person and 36 minutes if you're in EDL in the afternoon, that doesn't seem to be fair for the students who have to be online. And what other kinds of things can we put in place? We're working on those strategies. I will say that our what's modified block schedule with 3 classes per day has reduced the number of students that had to quarantine at Chaparral by half. Because if we had a normal 6-period day, double the number of kids who would have been in close contact, and you go from 219 to 438. So we're going to continue to look at what those structures might be, but we've heard loud and clear from our parents that they want full day, 5-day structure for their students. We want to be able to do that and should be able to do that in this environment, provided we at least stay in the moderate phase of transmission for COVID. If we move to red, and if the entire community is at red for a sustained period of time, then unless the board changes the metrics, the in-person option is off the table. There have been some people who have emailed and said, well, can you consider making an exception for K2 students? The governor in his executive order, one of the earlier ones, said, make plans for serving special education students, for example. So there are some things that could be considered, but right now we're focusing on the big plan, working to identify what worked in the first semester, what didn't work, and what we can improve, and trying to streamline and simplify in the areas where some of the complexity has created frustration for parents. In addition to expanding the committee that's working on the model, I'm also working on pulling together a referent group of parents with representation from all of our learning communities, so that once the model is in a form where we can actually present it, then we can get feedback from parents about what will work in that model, what they have concerns about in that model, so that we can begin to make those adjustments. The plan is to present this to the governing board on November 4th. We do not want to be in a place where we're trying to do our staffing a week before school starts, which is what we had in the fall. And so we've got to move pretty quickly to make the changes necessary to share with parents what the options will be. The other thing that we're thinking about in terms of efficiency and getting feedback from our families is to assume those that have chosen in-person schooling want to continue with in-person. So our commitment form will go out to those that have chosen enhanced distance learning or Scottsdale Online to find out whether or not they also want to come back to in-person. Remember, the definition ADHS is given for hybrid is that some students are online and some are in person. It doesn't differentiate any more than that. And that has created some angst for some people who think that when we have 90% of our students physically back in a building, that we're not doing a hybrid. Well, we're technically compliant. Do the buildings feel full? In some cases they do, but we don't have all of our classrooms filled in every building, and we do have the ability to accommodate more. Our neighboring districts that are reopening haven't done what we did to even guarantee the 3-foot minimum distance between students in terms of how our seats are set up in the classroom. In fact, they've said to their families, we can't guarantee physical distancing. They haven't changed class size. They haven't modified the numbers at the high school level. That's a part of just what they've communicated with their families. We have to work through how much risk people are willing to accept and what the impact is if we go back to all online, because we know there's an educational impact and a social emotional impact as well. And so it's balancing all of those factors that come into play as we make our plans for the second semester. Did I hit all the points, Emmy?
You did. Thank you very much. Well, when would parents be expected to have that commitment form?
Early November. I'm trying to remember the timeline that I saw as a draft, but probably by the second week of November, so that we can begin to do the staffing.
And that's a commitment for the full semester?
Well, that's our hope is, we want people to commit, but things change. And so we want the commitment to be as firm as it can be. If parents were to choose Scottsdale Online, one thing that we have learned is that going from what was traditional in Scottsdale Online, where you have 3 classes every 9 weeks, and then you have 3 more for the next 9 weeks to get your 6th in for a semester. Doing 6 classes over 18 weeks is really very challenging for many of our students because of the self-motivation required, the asynchronous nature of the learning. So we're going to go back to the Scottsdale Online model. So if parents choose that and you're at the high school level, you really don't have a good option to move back to in-person mid-semester because you've got a misalignment of the way you're taking your classes. But for other levels, there likely can be some flexibility, but we need to plan for it as best we can. So we do want people to make, an informed decision. And if you know you're going to be online and you want to be online, we want to staff that so that your needs are met. If you think you want to be in person, then we want to staff that as well. And then our community metrics will determine for how long we can actually remain in person.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate the opportunity to have you here each month.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Emmy.
Thank you. All right, next up we have Dr. Sackos, and Jill Lasson will be asking the questions that were submitted for her related to equity, inclusion, and diversity.
All right, great. Good evening, everybody.
Hi, Dr. Sackos. So I'll just jump right into it. And I'm reading these verbatim. So SUSD has cut opportunities, for example, elective course offerings to focus on student performance, especially at schools receiving Title I funding. What are SUSD's future plans to achieve parity among schools?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the district has cut opportunities in order to focus on student performance, for example, elective course offerings. And this has happened at schools receiving Title I funding. What are your future plans to achieve parity among schools?
Our goal is always to be able to assess where the gaps are in learning and provide a systematic approach to interventions. Oftentimes we see that if a student has failed a course, then we put them back in the course, the following semester, and they have to forfeit an elective. That certainly is not what we like to do. And that goes back to then trying to, again, identify in this day and age, the gaps in learning are vast, more than we normally see, just because of us being out of school. But we need to identify those gaps, provide those interventions embedded within the instruction, and then outside of those instruction through intervention, so that we can keep students in classes. In conversations with the Title I schools that I oversee, and specifically at Coronado, Miss Palatucci, we're always trying to be very creative. And Coronado has the opportunity to have the Rise Hour, again, in order to immediately meet the needs of students, rather than them failing and then having to forfeit an elective class. Because we know that many of these elective classes are what drive many of our students, and they perhaps may be more career-based, such as our CTE classes, and we don't want to see students forfeiting those to repeat academic classes. So again, it's focusing on where those gaps are, the right interventions, and making sure that our kids have those opportunities to enroll in those courses of interest.
Thank you. Talks about race can be challenging, but we must turn the silence into dialogue. These conversations are not reserved only for students of color, but for students in predominantly white schools too. You are equally responsible for helping our students build their capacity to understand and confront racism, as well as contribute to a society where peace and justice prevail. What steps are you taking today to provide parents with the resources needed to guide these conversations with students at home?
Well, I think our first step is really hearing the student voice and looking at our data on any disproportionality in, like you had mentioned, the opportunity to participate in different courses, looking at our discipline data to see any disproportionality, and then, of course, to hear the student's voice. And so we were off to a good start last year prior to the pandemic, and I'll never use the pandemic as an excuse, but we were off to a good start and beginning to hear that student voice through our teen town halls. And that was really important for us. And while we've had student assistance programs that have really targeted the needs of individual students, it was the first time that it was really a raw conversation of students coming to the podium and really sharing their feelings. we were able to provide our first one at Arcadia High School, then at Saguaro High School, and then of course by the time we had to close down our schools, we were unable to proceed at Desert Mountain. But to me, it's listening to student voice and letting us guide our decision making, and then looking at that data, that disproportionality in those course offerings, in discipline, et cetera. So that is one of the first steps. It's specific to the diversity, equity, and inclusion model. We really wanted to get a fast start in the spring to address some of the matters that came before us, like the murder of George Floyd, and address some of our students that came forward and said, we want to do something, we want to recognize this. So we were quick to engage a group, and we're going to continue that engagement with the group. And so we started the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee that had the adults and the students in the room. And what we heard from the students is we really want to be separated, and we want to have our own place where we can voice our concerns in a safe environment. So along with myself, Shannon Cron is leading the student portion of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And again, they're talking to us about effective ways to communicate. We're not so effective as adults in what we think. They have different ways of communicating, and they're teaching us how they'd like to do that. They're again telling us how they would like a safe place to talk, and it begins with our smaller group and then expands to the campuses, so that we can formulate student assistance programs that are very targeted. And then they are very interested in making sure that we are doing our due diligence in getting out information to the underrepresented group. And I'm looking at some of my notes. One of the things they said is, again, just like, for instance, scholarship opportunities, we want to make sure that our underrepresented group gets this information. So I know that's kind of a long answer to your question, but I'm very passionate about, again, engaging the students. The pandemic has slowed down our ability to meet face-to-face. So, however, our next meeting next week is going to be at their comfort level, and we're going to be coming face-to-face, and we're scheduled to be meeting once a month. And one of our first tasks for the student advisory group will be, I lead that too, but for the diversity, equity, inclusion group, student portion of it is to move forward with the teen town hall specifically for Desert Mountain, which we had to postpone in the spring, and then Chaparral and Coronado in the spring of 2021.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to actually jump just because you touched on something just now. You're talking about a meeting next month. Someone asks you, what is the status of the DEI task force at SUSD? I'm on it, but I haven't heard anything. When should I expect to get an update?
So let me just back up to the first thing. Some of you know that we divided up the DEI group with the adults being our community members, our teachers, our parents, and to the student group. So Dr. Hagigat is, along with Miss Marshall, our general counsel is helping, is leading the adult group. Shannon Cron and I are leading the student group. So I would have to defer that question. I don't think she's with us tonight, but ask her that question as to when that group is meeting. I can tell you that some of the steps, and everyone seemed to know Dr. Sallu, but me, I'm sorry I missed you last month when our team went over to Chandler to talk about the great work you're doing there. But I know that that is part of the next steps for the adult group, I'll call it, is to, again, look at some of what's working in other districts. I know I look forward to see you, Dr. Sallu, at the Betsy conference coming up in the last week of October, to hear those important conversations on what is going to be presented. And I think the title of that, the impact of racialized trauma in Black students. And so I'm registered for that particular conference. So, and I think there's a book study going on alongside of that as well. But my focus has particularly been on students. No offense to the adults. but that is where my expertise lies. So I'm working with the student group right now.
Okay. I'll go back up. What you mentioned data. What sort of data is currently available around diversity issues in our district? We'd like to see things like race as it pertains to achievement gaps, disciplinary measures, suspensions or expulsions, perhaps school funding differences across different schools, the ratio of school mental health professionals to students, and diversity amongst teachers to represent the student population. Sorry, go.
Oh, no, go ahead, finish your question. I'm sorry.
The last bit of this question was, has any kind of survey been conducted recently? And if not, can we get the ball rolling on conducting that research as it relates to that?
So some of the data sets that have been available to us for several years has been what is our office discipline referrals. We call those the ODRs, and we frequently, and now under the direction of Ms. Cron and the Director of Student Services, run that data and look at disproportionalities. And so we've been doing that for many years, which really took us in 2 years ago to some in-depth training on restorative practices, and which we've been rolling out for the last couple of years. We also have access to our Arizona Youth Survey, our AYS data, that's done every 2 years, that gives us some additional feedback. And then from the academic side of things, we can also look at the number of students that are taking honors and AP courses. And that's one of the things we've really been trying to do this last year, now that we've got some additional funding, is to make sure that we're encouraging all of our students to take that AP course and the AP exam that goes along with it, with those scholarships to go alongside of that. So that's just a handful of some of the things that we're able to look at. And we'll continue to look at. Naturally, our discipline data is a little bit, well, I'd like to say we really made improvements. We haven't had much discipline in quarter four and then the quarter one of this fall, but that wouldn't be fair because we haven't had students. And so we're going to have to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples, but we'll continue to do that, as that data comes available to us.
Okay. What are the plans to implement any sort of diversity, equity, inclusion / belonging curriculum?
So I think we really, and I know that was some of the takeaways, and I believe Ms. Cron and Ms. Marshall were two of the ones that got to meet with Dr. Sallu, was talking about, we're not just looking at, disproportionality and discipline and making sure we're not treating, students differently. We look at those educational opportunities, and we also ensure that it's embedded in the curriculum as well. So that work is forthcoming. I think there's what we've learned is we really have to build capacity. And I'm sure Dr. Sallu may talk about this, but we have to build capacity at the top and embrace this as a goal. Not just from our governing board, but also with our district leadership team, and as we continue to educate and roll out the training. One thing I do want to add is that I know that Ms. Marshall she does have a separate policy committee, and I know that one of the things that they're looking at coming up is the anti-discrimination policy, and making sure that they are adding protective classes for an example. So there's multifaceted things that have to be done, and it's not going to be done in 6 months, 1 year. It's an ongoing focus and commitment that we have to have.
Is there any plan to bring a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement to the board, or is this hinging on what comes out of these committees?
I think that is possible in the future. I think that we need to, again, tackle some of the early work of really assessing where we are. We have contracted with Hanover, and that's another piece of data that we looked at the last 2 years in terms of climate and culture, and looking at, some of the questions for students in terms of, their feeling of safety and, they're being bullied, and were they bullied based on, who they are. And so we had that data as well, but we're also looking at additional work that Hanover might be able to help us with to really dig deep into hearing the student's voice. We're beginning the conversation with this, like I said, I'm beginning the conversation with the students, and, they're giving me a little schooling on how to listen to them. And so we're going to be working on how to best solicit their opinions, and those that have been able to participate in the teen town hall really think that is a first step in opening up the difficult conversations, and then moving from there.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for being here answering these questions. I know that these are not easy questions. I have 2 left.
Yeah,
you.
and hey, how come Dr. Menzel got his in advance? I didn't get mine.
I don't think he got them all in advance, did he? Just
No, just the one question about the filters, because I figured that was something he would not have off the top of his head.
I'm just kidding.
So someone asks, how do you determine the DEI issues in our district, and what do you envision our district will look like when your goals have been met?
So say that first part again.
How do you determine the
Okay.
DEI issues?
Well, like I mentioned, it's looking at some of the data that's available to us, looking at what data what information we still need to solicit from our stakeholders, and that student voice being very critical. And so again, having that information, both quantitative and qualitative, is the first step in really understanding the issues. And I really envision seeing, our schools that are very inclusive of each other. Unfortunately, I've seen this pandemic really divide individuals, and it's so important that we bring people back together. And that's what I really envision for all of our campuses. Walking our campuses and seeing our students is quite amazing. I think that oftentimes they're more forgiving and inclusive than some of us adults. And so that's really promising to me.
Okay, and final question is, what specific measures have you initiated to encourage diversity, equity, and belonging in SUSD for students, staff, and families in our community since you've been an administrator?
So I had the opportunity of being the executive director of student services prior to stepping in the role as assistant superintendent of secretary. So the vast majority of my district administrative years has been 10 years in that student services role. And so a lot of what I mentioned in looking at that discipline data, putting together restorative practices, PBIS, a number of those research-based programs, again, to level the playing field for students and treat each other, with respect. And that is something that that student services role still falls under my department. And so that's still very much under my umbrella and still very much important to me. So I will continue to do that. We are just now getting back going with our student assistance programs, and we started back. Quarter 4 was a little bit more difficult, but quarter 1. And so part of it too is just, and thank you to the governing board who's been able to, again, prioritize funding for decreasing counselor ratios, for paying for social workers at each campus. Over the years, we've depended on grants to continue this important work, which we still will write for grants. So a lot of that is continuing to do the work. And again, the grants you receive is only as good as your measurements of effectiveness and showing what the school is already doing and has done in order to address some of the needs. And so that was one thing I was very proud of in the student services department. And so again, that still being under my umbrella and overseeing secondary education, that's still extremely important to me.
Well, thank you so much. That's all I have. I hope that was as painless as possible. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, it's always nice. It's nice to see some friendly faces out there, and I hope to be able to see people in person one of these days. So
Well, we're
It's
here.
a challenge. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Dr. Sackos, and thank you, Jill. Okay, and next, oh, and here is her contact information. Just thought I would include that as well. And we have Kyra to introduce our speaker for tonight. Kira, I'm sorry.
Hello. All right. Well, I'm introducing Dr. Adama Sallu. She is currently the director of the Equity and Inclusion. She's director of Equity and Inclusion for the Chandler Unified School District. She's a national and statewide presenter on cultural competency and educational equity. She's the founder of the East Valley Equity Consortium, recipient of the 2016 Tempe, Arizona Martin Luther King Jr. Education Award, and much, much more. So we are honored to have her leading this workshop series to better educate the Scottsdale community on these important issues in education and in our society as a whole. So Dr. Sallu, I'll let you take over and explain what this exciting workshop is all about.
Okay, let me share my screen with, before I do that, actually, thank you for the welcome. Kira, thank you for the early introduction. Jill, thank you for the invite. Dr. Menzel, if you're still around, thank you for your leadership. I'm humbled to be here with you all. Thank you again for allowing my voice in this space. You called me to have this dialogue that is difficult, uncomfortable, but needed to have. And today is just a preview, right? Today is just a preview of what's to come. So let me just start by saying thank you for having me. I'm humbled to be here, and I hope for the next 20, 30 minutes, I'll give you an overview of the work we plan to do together, because this work is collective work. It's not one person doing the work. And hopefully we all can come back for the next 3 series to kind of engage each other in the learning that we are called to do. So let me start with my screen. So thank you. The planning team, the EI planning team, thank you. Okay. Thank you. So our topic really is like, how do we have the courage?
I think you need to unshare and then share again. It's sharing your Zoom screen.
Okay, let me get out. Okay. Okay. Am I your screen sharing? Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep, there it is.
Okay. So before we do this work, I'd like to really have a protocol as we come together to engage around such a difficult but needed dialogue around equity and inclusion. So for this evening, I'm going to borrow from my colleague and friend, Glenn Singleton and Curtis, around this whole idea of staying engaged this evening, stay engaged in the work we are called to do. I ask that we stay engaged emotionally, spiritually, physically, and cognitively as we come together and really try to understand how to best meet the needs of our community and our schools and our children. And I also need to experience discomfort. The work is uncomfortable. There are those who say, I'm okay, don't make me uncomfortable. But I'm going to really beg folk as we engage in this series to really experience discomfort and to embrace the discomfort. And when you're uncomfortable, I want you to do something sacred. I want you to ask yourself, what are you feeling in your head? What are you feeling in your heart, in your gut? What are you feeling? And make a point of that notation in your body. How's your body feeling and responding in your discomfort? And name it. I would like you to name it. So you're going to embrace your discomfort. You're going to name it where it resides in your body. It's in your head. It's in your heart. It's in your chest. It's in your gut. And hold on to that discomfort. And also, as we do this series, I want people to really speak your truth. We all have our worldview, how we see the world, how we are raised by our families, our teachers, our community, how they raised us. We all have our truth, so speak your truth. And as we do this journey of the work, the last one is to expect non-closure and accept non-closure. The work we are called to do, folk, is work that will never conclude. Not like we are chapter 1 to chapter 5, now we are done, let's move. It's work that's really ongoing. It's work that you never really arrive at the conclusion point. It's work that will keep us ongoing. So that's our protocol, and I'm going to use this protocol whenever we come together and meet, okay? So my story, who is this woman in front of you? My story, the day I was born, my father wept. My sister came along, he wept some more. My third sister came and he felt he was cursed by God. My birth was cursed by God because when in Sierra Leone in West Africa, where a daughter was perceived as no, a culture where boys and having a male child was the ideal. For daughters, you belong to 3 men in your lifetime as a girl. You belong to your father as a little girl, your husband as a young woman, and to your son as your elder. So my father mourned my birth. I was denied the joy of naming ceremonies to name me to welcome me to the world, simply because I was a girl. My mother wasn't allowed to go to school because she was a girl. In her family where she was born, girls stay in the kitchen with their mothers and they are raised to take care of husbands. So my mom was denied the joy of reading and writing. My dad, in his quest to have a son, it's a long story, kind of abandoned the family, and my mother stepped in. And she had only one desire. It's for her daughters, the 3 daughters, to know how to read and write. That's all she wanted. Because she knew there was power to read and write. She didn't know the whole story, but she knew it was denied her. Today, I'm here with you. My sister, who passed away a few years ago, worked for the UN, was in Liberia, working for the UN. My third sister, Amina, she is an NP, nurse practitioner, and she lives in Massachusetts. And our children, my nephew is a medical doctor. My own daughter is a healthcare policy analyst. She lives in Washington, D.C. My son went to the Air Force after high school, and he's doing his thing in California, in college in California. My niece is a lawyer in Liberia, and my other nephew has a degree in petroleum engineering. I share my mother's story to illustrate the power of education, the power of daughters going to school, the power that schooling changes our lives, right? I share that story to really illustrate when I was born, how I came to the world. And then another pivotal moment was when I came to America. I became Black. I remember coming to America at the age of 16 and I was called Black. I'm like, I'm not Black. I'm not Black. I'm from Sierra Leone. What do you mean I'm Black? And the meaning of Blackness and how Blackness is lived in America, how Blackness is interpreted in America, how Blackness is encased in colonialization, in pain, in subjugation, in violence, in theft. I inherited that Blackness. And I've come to embrace that Blackness. The next clip I want to show to you is a video around this idea of Blackness. I want you to pay attention with your bodies. Take a pen and write what you're feeling when you're watching this video, and pay attention to this idea of Blackness, how it's lived. So pay attention to the next video. Take a pen. What are you feeling and what are you thinking? As this idea of Blackness that I inherited, that my African American brothers and sisters lived this experience for over 400 years, lived in subjugation of Blackness. And I came at the age of 16. And I was told, just like in Sierra Leone, you're a girl. I come here, oh, you're Black. What that Blackness meant. Take a look.
We had called them bike hikes. We were just going out to go explore your world.
It would be at least 6, 7, 8 of us. Our parents said as long as you were home before the streetlights came on, you stayed as a group, you're fine.
So we can hear it, but we can't see it.
Shine. The children in the neighborhood plan to go on a trip to McDonald's. Just have some fun, something different to do.
Rosedale, we thought was a safe place. We all went down, we were riding our bikes.
Hey, Adama, we can only hear the video. We cannot see
You
it.
can see it? Okay, well, hold up. Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you, my
We
friend.
saw a group outside on the block, so we were like, oh, this is a block party.
The last thing that I remember was someone saying, oh,
Could you not see the video?
It probably opened it in a new window and you weren't sharing that window because you were sharing the original one. So that's
Okay.
probably
Let
why.
me go back. Let me exit out of here. Can you see my screen? Can you still see my screen?
Yes, we can see your PowerPoint screen right now.
Okay. Let me go back to slide mode.
we had called them bike hikes. We were just going out to go explore your world.
It would be at least 6, 7, 8 of us. Our parents said as long as you were home before the streetlights came on, you stayed as a group, you're fine.
It was a beautiful day, sunshine.
Not yet.
Children in the
Again,
neighborhood.
only audio.
Okay. All right. Let me. Okay. Can you also see my screen?
Yes.
Let me stop screen sharing and go back to it one more time. One more try, folks. Okay. One more try. Just bear with me. Slide. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me try one more time. Can you see the screen?
It looked like your cursor touched the play a minute ago.
Okay. Can you see it?
No. Can you go to the link, like in your browser, and just play the video for us?
Okay. Let me go into the browser. Connect from the browser. Okay.
Yeah, and then share that screen instead of the PowerPoint because it's opening in a different window, but you only let it share the the PowerPoint. So
okay, let me minimize this and go to my browser. Can you see my browser? Can you see this now? No. Okay.
no, you have to
It keeps saying no. Let me see. Okay, I'm having difficulty with that one. All right.
That's okay. We've all been there with the Zoom stuff.
And I tried it. Let me see one more time. One more time. Share screen one more time.
If it doesn't work, you are an amazing storyteller.
But wait, I want to say this because it kind of blends in really.
I think we might be able
There
to
we
see
go.
now.
Let me start all over.
Oh,
All righty. It's not letting me. We'll have to come back to it. Can you see my screen?
Try sharing.
Bryn shared the link in the chat. I don't know if you're able to do that, but that is the link.
The link where? And I have the, can you see it now?
Yeah.
Can you see my screen? Okay. Can you see it?
Jill, can you see the link in the chat?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I think I can play it.
Yeah, let's try that.
Okay, so I'm gonna.
And I was home, I work on this to ensure that it's working fine, and then now this. Okay.
I don't know if it's gonna, hold on a second. Not sure if it's gonna, oh, there we go. Sound.
We had called them bike hikes. We were just going out to go explore your world.
It would be at least 6, 7, 8 of us. Our parents said as long as you were home before the streetlights came on, you stayed as a group, you're fine.
It was a beautiful day, sunshine. The children in the neighborhood planned to go on a trip to McDonald's, just have some fun, something different to do.
Rosedale, we thought, was a safe place. We all went down, we were riding our bikes.
And then we saw down the block that there was this beautiful American flag blowing in the wind.
We saw a group outside on the block, so we was like, oh, this is a block party.
The last thing that I remember was someone saying, oh, a parade. And so we went down to go see the parade. And I laugh about it to this day because it was a parade to get the black people out of Rosedale.
It's the summer of 1975. White residents in Rosedale, Queens are protesting black families moving into the neighborhood. These are scenes from a documentary produced by journalist Bill Moyers.
Does he have a right to live here? No. Why not? Because he's black.
This was not the South. This was not Greenville, Mississippi, or Spartanburg, South Carolina, or Atlanta, Georgia. This was right in the heart of the greatest metropolitan area in the country.
The documentary was found nearly 45 years later by a graduate student who posted a short clip on the internet. It went viral on Twitter and Facebook. And a question people kept asking, where are the kids now?
Hey, Rob, this is Whitney Hurst calling from the New York Times. My name's Whitney Hurst. I'm a journalist.
To answer that question, we called more than 90 people who had lived in Rosedale at that
I was
time.
trying to find anyone that might have known someone.
We couldn't find any white residents who said they'd been there.
Came out because she got a little bit crazy.
But we spoke with several of the black children. We wanted to hear what happened to them that day, to understand why their experience is resonating decades later.
We went down to see what was going on, probably in the middle of a block. That's when we figured out it was something else. And it was something that we definitely were not invited to.
We noticed that they were running towards us. I was like, wow. You know, like, why are they rushing towards us, not thinking anything negative? And then we heard, nigger.
They surrounded my best friend at the time, Marina. One of the young men hit her. And they started calling us names. They started throwing rocks.
Hearing the word, hearing it directed at me, why are you calling me that? That's not me. You know, I've always been told that's not me. I didn't understand. I was like, who do you think you are to say we can't come here? Like, how dare you?
What happened to you?
This little boy, he threw the rock. He tried to hit my sister, but he almost hit me about that much away from me. And I was sure wish he had hit me with that rock. I would pick up the rock right next to me and hit him right dead in his face.
I was just kind of amazed to see that people can act like that, to tell you the truth. But that was like really the first where I was like, wow, people do not like black people.
They gonna always do that. They always spit on us like we some dogs. They always spit back on them. Ain't nothing gonna change.
I immediately was reminded of those programs my parents would have me watch with the dogs and the hoses and people trying to vote and being killed and lynched. It went right back to my history in this country. It just linked me immediately with that whole experience because I felt it.
Do you forgive them?
No. No. Can't take back no hurt.
And I didn't know what to do with those feelings. I did not know what to do with those feelings.
For Moyers, the video going viral shows how powerful images can be.
He tried to hit my sister, but we were in their neighborhood.
Go ahead and stop.
I do believe that television has been a great teacher. This country didn't really respond to what was going on in the South, although it was well known, until the sheriff in Birmingham turned the water hoses and the dogs on those young people who were demonstrating there. We knew about it, we heard about it, we were aware of it, but we didn't see it. We couldn't escape it once we saw it.
As we filmed in Rosedale, a group of blacks from South Jamaica was coming through the neighborhood in a demonstration of support.
Every time a group of blacks get together, they want to help Rosedale with their problems. We don't need any outsiders helping us with our problems. And we'll stay white, period.
All right, so guys, this next scene is very disturbing.
Can you all see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, all right.
Sorry about that.
What are you feeling? What are you thinking? You have to answer, just sit with that. What are you feeling? What are you thinking? That's the culture I inherited as a Black young woman from Sierra Leone. And that's the story of my Black sisters and brothers in this country for 400 years. So our conversation is going to be really framing this whole idea of inequities in our society. The inequities in our society is by design, folk. And so it's a society, it's in our school systems. Our school systems are full of inequities. It is steep in inequities, and they're not accidental. They are by design. Our goal is, as folks who care for equity and inclusion in this country, in our schools, in our communities, we want to create an equitable society and thus an equitable school systems. I heard your questions to Dr. Sackos this evening. I sat here smiling in my heart. And so in a series, really, we're going to really focus on that. How do we the adults, how do we create an equitable school system? What does that look like? And then do we have the courage? Do we have the courage, folk? Do we have the courage to be leaders, to say, this is good for all children? So I'm going to use critical race theory to kind of inform the work we're going to be doing. Again, I'm a little bit in academics. So the two really tenets of critical race theory, I'm going to focus on the idea of storytelling, counter storytelling, and the critique of liberalism. Pretty much counter storytelling is, again, through my African lens, it's about Anansi the spider. As a child growing up in Sierra Leone, we know about this Anansi the spider. It's our own folktale in Africa. And there's a story about Anansi the spider, the lion, and the hunter. The hunter had wounded the lion. The lion was wounded, couldn't speak. So the hunter went around telling the lion's story and telling the lion, so the lion, one day the lion woke up, got some strength. The lion said, that's not my story. That is not my story. I'll tell you my story. And the hunter is really mad. The hunter is so mad, they've banished critical race theory. They've banished equity working in federal programming. They've banished books because the lion is uncomfortable. The hunter is uncomfortable with the lion's story, but the lion is woke. The lion is telling their own story. So counter storytelling says that I'll tell you my story. I'll tell you my story. No, you. Let me tell you my story. And the others that critical liberal is this idea of color blindness. People say, oh, I don't see color. I treat them all the same. I don't see color. Well, actually, that's color evasiveness. Because that's color evasiveness. You don't want to see me, saying that I don't want to see you. Let me just be comfortable. So again, now use critical race theory throughout our time together to kind of unpack the work we are called to do. So we're going to have 3 sessions, folks. The first is really looking at societal inequities. Because every inequity in our system, it's by design. It's deliberately set up, right? It's by design. I was saying to somebody the other day that in societies where you had this color line, those that came about through conquest, colonialization, theft, violence, and human subjugation, right? So America is in the societies. If you go to England and Belgium, right, the societies and the things that happen, yeah, that's America's birthing place. I'm not embarrassed. I love America. I can talk about that. It doesn't mean I don't love America, but that's the genesis of America, right? This place of theft from Native American people, this black body used to build the wealth of this country. But yeah, we blame them, right? And so we're really looking at that and learning the key concepts to build our own capacity as to become a voice for equity in our schools, in our community. Second session, we're going to look at education system through the lens of race. Race is always present, folk. Race is always present. Really, it's always present. So we're going to look at the school systems in this country, how they came about through the lens of race, called Race Matters. I know we don't want to talk about race. It's uncomfortable. Oh, I'm not racist. We're forced to be authentic and do this work with fidelity, folks. We must really talk about race in a way that makes us uncomfortable and pained. And it is that discomfort that we're going to grow and support our schools, our communities, our churches, and our spheres of influence. Then the last session is this question. Dr. King asked this question, actually, Dr. King, before he was killed, his last book. Where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? As it's called the Unified Parent Council. Where do we go from here, right? How do we, as parents, it's called the Unified School District, how do we work towards building an equitable, just society? What does that look like? What does that look like, folks? It's not easy work. What does that look like? So through our series, we're going to be really unpacking all of these 3 elements, 3 sessions, looking at systems, really. And there's a lot. We're going to be doing that. So we're going to build capacity, right? We're going to build capacity. I'll do presentations with you all. We're going to provide you books and articles and podcasts, right? We're going to have films and TED Talks and videos. We're going to be really talking to each other. We're going to be in breakout sessions, really unpacking a little breakout sessions. We're going to cry. We're going to be having tears. We're going to leave here saying, okay, what do I do? What do I do? Because this is our calling now, folks. We are here, all of us, we are here for such a time as this. We are called to do this for all our kids. So again, we're going to build that capacity. Because the goal is really to have you all be equicentric leaders. How do you all become equicentric leadership? Equicentric leadership is all about being a threat to inequities. That's what really that means. Being equicentric is like you're a threat. That I or Emmy or Lulu or Brad or Rose, that we are a threat to inequities in our schools and our societies. So how do we become that? So that's really my vision and my hope and my prayer, that after these sessions, we can become really that leadership and be yearners for knowledge, listening to podcasts and asking questions if we're uncomfortable. My goal is to remove the veils and say, oh my gosh, I did not know that before, okay? So planning ahead, folks. So we're going to take your calendars. You're going to be coming for the next 3 weeks. We're going to be starting next Wednesday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. I know that Jill and Kira and the folks from the D&I committee are going to be having these days to you all. But these are our dates. I know one is after the election, but right, these are our dates. We're going to come together, learn together, build capacity together, be in breakout sessions, read books, watch videos and films, TED Talks that seeks to build us so it can be a voice for our children. because our goal is to provide mirrors and windows for our children. I have used the metaphor of mirrors and windows in the past couple of years in CUSD with my teachers in CUSD. White children, when they go to school, white kids of European descent, white children, when they go to school, they have a lot of mirrors. White kids have a lot of mirrors in school. The adults look like them. The books say they discover ice cream and everything in the world. It's all about white children. We fail white children because we don't give them any windows to self-critique themselves. We don't provide white children the tools they need to live in the multi-racial, multi-sexual orientation, multi-religious global space. We fail our white babies by not giving them the windows they need to navigate and be with others unlike them. The kids of color go to school, meaning Black, brown, Native American kids, they come to school. All they have, folks, are windows. That's all they have, are windows. They have no mirrors to see themselves. The books, we all know in high school, what do we have? The canon, the Western canon, right? Canterbury Tales, Macbeth, Shakespeare, ooh, the canon. And we failed those brown and Black and red kids in our classrooms. Or we failed to give them mirrors that they also matter in this space called schooling, this idea of schooling, that you matter in this space. We don't do that. I'm gonna share with you a little clip from this Latina, Afro-Latina woman. And again, listen to her soul. Take notes. What do you hear? All right. And I hope it worked this time too, though. So, be with me here as I try this one also. I'm going to be, and I practice all day to ensure this is going to work. Can you see my screen?
Afro-Latina, camina conmigo. Salsa swagger anywhere she go, como la negra tiene tumbao azúcar. Dance to the rhythm, beat the drums of my skin. Afro descendant, the rhythms within. The first language I spoke was Spanish. Learn from lullabies whispered in my ear. My parents' tongue was a gift which I quickly forgot after realizing my peers did not understand it. They did not understand me. So I rejected habichuela and mango, much preferring Happy Meals and Big Macs, straightening my hair in imitation of Barbie. I was embarrassed by my grandmother's colorful skirts and my mother's ebroki ingli, which cracked my pride when she spoke. So shit, I would poke fun at her myself, hoping to lessen the humiliation. Proud to call myself American, a citizen of this nation. I hated caramel colored skin. Curse God, I've been born the color of cinnamon, how quickly we forget where we come from. So remind me that I come from the Taínos of the Rio, the Aztec, the Mayan, los Incas, los Españoles con sus fincas buscando oro, and the Yoruba Africanos que con sus manos built a mundo nunca imaginado. I know I come from stolen gold, from cocoa, from sugarcane, the children of slaves and slave masters, a beautifully tragic mixture, a sancocho of erased history, and my memory can't seem to escape the thought of lost lives and indigenous rape. A bittersweet bitterness, a feeling innate, the soul of a people past, present, and fate. Our stories cannot be checked into boxes. They are in the forgotten, the undocumented, the passed down spoonfuls of arroz con dulce at abuela's knee. They're the way our hips skip to the beat of cumbia, merengue, y salsa. They're in the bending and blending of backbones. We are deformed and reformed beings. It's in the sway of our song, the landscapes of our skirts, the azúcar beneath our tongues. We are the unforeseen children. We're not a cultural wedlock. Hair too kinky for Spain, too wavy for dreadlocks. So our palms tell the cuentos of many tierras. Read our lifeline, birth of intertwined moonbeams and starshine. We are every ocean cross. North Star navigates our waters. Our bodies have been bridges. We are the sons and daughters. El destino de mi gente. Black, brown, beautiful. Viviremos para siempre. Afro-Latinos hasta la muerte.
Welcome to the series. That's just a quick overview of what we're going to be doing in the next 3 weeks. Right now it's 7:31. I'm going to pause for Q&A, questions and thoughts you have. but we've been meeting and planning, and I've been planning and working and developing programming. But we're in for time to learn, to reflect, to be uncomfortable. And I'm gonna push boundaries for you to be uncomfortable and knowing that I have your back when you're uncomfortable, because we cannot do this work if we're not uncomfortable. I thank you for having me.
Thank you. We can do some Q&A, but I wanted to share, sorry, I just want to share the link to sign up. So here's the link for anyone who wants to sign up. As she said, that the next 3 Wednesdays, except the 11th is not a Wednesday. Oh, I'm sorry, that's gonna be the 10th, and it's gonna be from 6 to 7:30. So we'll send an email with this information, but just wanted to make sure everyone saw the link.
Emmy, I'm being told that the link isn't working, so I don't know if you've set it up to accept registrations yet, but I'm just letting you know.
Thank you.
We have people already chomping to get registered for it, so that's a good sign.
I think we can just open it up to anyone who wants to say a question, can just unmute themselves.
Thank you, Adama, for leading from the front. I think it's really important to have these courageous conversations, and I'm very grateful that you're going to be part of this conversation to help move Scottsdale, not just the school, but the community forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Do you have specific homework you want people to start looking at before the sessions?
Jill?
We do. We will probably, Emmy, send out an email with the link to the pages, with the resources, and that, oh gosh, Brad did make the page, and Dr. Sallu, you were still finalizing the resources. So once we get those, probably tomorrow, then we can post them, and then people can start, watching videos and doing whatever it is you have them doing.
And we're deliberate though with the learning, the pre-learning. Before each session, there's a pre-learning. So we have podcasts, we have videos, we have books, we have articles. Because people are really busy. You might not have to read the whole book. Like I'm a reader, I'm always have a book in my hand. We'll try to really create several pathways of learning so that you can be prepared and have this question. Somebody just posted Nice White Parents. I'm like, yeah, that's part of our podcast. It's a great podcast, Nice White Parents. Oh my gosh. I see my family is all through that Nice White Parents. It's a really thought-provoking podcast, right? So again, we will have all of that, and before each session, you have access to that to get yourself ready to come and learn together. Because that's really the goal, right? To build our capacity as parents, as teachers, as community members, to be able to live and to negotiate ourselves in this multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-sexual orientation, difference in the human global space. All right. So yes, Susan, to your answer, we do have that. And I hope that you can utilize that resources even after the series to build capacity.
And the link is now working.
And so yeah, we skip the Wednesday because that's Veterans Day. So we'll do the day before Veterans Day, that Tuesday will be our last day. It'll be every week, so we can really be fully engaged in the learning together. Any questions or comments? Are you excited about the series? Okay, I'm excited. I'm excited about the series. We've been excited planning it for the last month. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? Are you going to bring your friends, tell your neighbors, your girlfriends?
All of the above.
All of the above, okay.
Should we include our children, our older high school age kids? Is that something that we should do? Or is this just like parents?
Let me have Jill or Emmy answer that, because the learning, you can have high school kids be part of it, right? So I'll say bring high school children, because I mean, it's really not like necessarily rated R or rated anything, right? It's really providing knowledge for kids and building all our capacity. And I know Dr. Sackos talked about student voice. How do we activate student voice to be leaders in their community? Because our children, folk, they are way over here and we're over here. They're like a 20, we are like 1. I have some kids in CUSD who created a hashtag, divorce our narrative in CUSD. These are high school kids. They are white, they are black, they are Hispanic, and they're Asian. And they are like, we read all this book by old white men. We need books that reflect us, right? And so these kids are pushing. So they know more than we do. And they are ready for the work. We are not, but the kids are ready, right? They are just like, ooh, maybe not, right? So please, yeah, if you would like to bring high school, maybe juniors, seniors, I mean, I don't see why not. But again, I'll leave it up to the council to determine that.
I would say it really depends on you as a parent, if you know, how you feel about your kids. I do, to Stuart's point, where he says, I would want this to be a safe space for adults to have adult conversations about these issues and be able to make mistakes. I agree with that point as well, but as a parent, you know your kids best. If you think that this is good for them to hear and be a part of the process, I mean, who are we to stop you? What do you think, Kira?
Well, my kids are still young, so
I know, mine too. So I'm here to learn.
So I'm thinking maybe after we get through the workshop, maybe we could set something up for the students to participate. I really think it's important.
It is
important. It's a great idea, and especially since Dr. Sackos expressed how much she wants students to be a part of the process in our district. That is definitely something we could look at doing after these sessions, or at least the first couple.
Yeah, and I think it's powerful. We'll be doing in CU is they actually having forums, virtual forums for students. We ask them 2 questions: how are you doing, and what do you need from us? Oh boy, those 2 questions. How are you doing? What do you need from schools? Oh, whew. The kids are like, and that's just their own space for children, right? That's only their space. And we're just getting in here, you know, they're telling us what they need.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Sallu. So that'd be something I'm very much interested in, is seeing how we can engage our diversity, equity, and inclusion group with the work that you're doing. I know in years past, we were able to take students to the Betsy conference who were part of it. And I was hoping to do that too, but don't know if that would be appropriate. But I'm happy. I know Ms. Marshall has your contact information, and I'm happy to talk to you about how we can get you to come and begin that dialogue. Sorry, my dogs are very excited about this work too. To talk about how we can engage our students. Because as I said, this is not an area of expertise of mine. However, I have worked closely with kids for years, and so would look forward to having those discussions.
Yeah, the kids are ready. Thank you. The kids are ready.
As a parent, I would love for us to be bold and to not be timid in our action, and to start big and to start strong, and to really take the bulls by the horn and go into the schools and work on the curriculums and go into the clubs and put it out to everybody. I don't think this is something we should be slow about, and I don't think it's something we should be selective about. And that's coming from a parent that has a high schooler. And I think this is so important. This is the time. I feel really passionate about this, as I know all of you do. And I don't think it's something to wait on. I don't think it's something to, contemplate anymore. I think it's something to act on.
Yes, and I agree with it being important to focus on the children, but I think it all starts with the adults. There's so much work that needs to be done with adults that are dealing with kids, and kids don't expel themselves. That happens through disciplinary measures from adults and biases from adults. I think that's where I would like to see the focus as well. So yeah.
But educating the hearts and minds of the youth along with adults simultaneously, I think, is important, because then we're all digesting the same positive material, the same informative material, and it also can help us engage with our children about what's important and what are our values.
I think it's important to also remind people that this three-part workshop that you're going to be leading, Adama, is sponsored and promoted by Scottsdale Parent Council. It is independent of the district. District obviously is being invited to it, but this is being led and supported by the Parent Council. I'm happy to have any of the SPC board chime in on that.
Yes, that's correct. Our outreach, our DEI committee has been working on it along with our programming director, Jill, and they'll be leading some of the breakout groups. But everyone is welcome, parents, community members. It doesn't have to be a parent, just anyone within the community.
Thank you.
So, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Sallu, for being here tonight. We'll put on our social media and everything that link again. So please participate, and we'll be sending resources for people to start doing their pre-work. So
and
thank you, everyone.
Anyone who's able to share on your platforms or to anyone in the community you think that would be interested as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's exactly.